Let's pray. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. So in the season of Advent, I've been taking a somewhat different approach to my sermons, and I've been going with no manuscript or notes and trying to have a more conversational approach to this time together, including asking some non-rhetorical questions of us all together and hoping to get some answers and some feedback as we explore this time together and kind of experiment with this word time to see what God is doing amongst all of us and how God is stirring up in us. And so I'll be asking some questions, and if you have answers, feel free to shout them out as we see what happens with this time together. And if the idea of saying things during the sermon makes you uncomfortable, it's fine. You don't have to say anything, but the idea of preaching this way makes me a little uncomfortable and outside my own comfort zone. And so I do think there's something kind of blessed about us all being uncomfortable together in this season of Advent. We'll be using the Isaiah text as our grounding text as we do this, as we've been doing throughout the season of Advent, in part because the Isaiah texts line up so well with this Advent idea, this Isaiah text that point to this future vision of what God's world looks like, this vision of God's dream for the world, of what God is doing in the world, and ultimately what God in Christ will do. And so we talked a couple weeks ago about peace. We talked first about world peace, right? About nation will not lift up sword against nation, and they'll beat their swords into plowshares, and the idea of a world at peace. But then last week explored peace more individually too, right? Also wolf and lamb laying together, child and snake playing together, and how this peace isn't just a nation thing, but is also a personal thing that we experience between us and our neighbor, our peace within our own selves. Today, Isaiah broadens this vision again, continues to broaden it, and he talks more about peace, but it's not just about peace anymore. He writes, a highway shall be there. It shall be called the Holy Way. It will be for God's people, and no traveler, not even fools, shall go astray. It's this vision of a highway. When Isaiah is writing, the people are in exile. God's people have been conquered. They've been defeated. They've been squished and crushed and are now scattered all over the place. And they yearn for the day where they'll be united again and they'll be in God's land again with God. And so this vision is a vision of salvation. It's a vision of a highway to bring the people home, to bring them to God, to bring them to life. It's a vision of salvation. So peace fits into that. We'll talk about that. But today we're going to talk a little more about salvation in general, in big, lofty ways. And what is it we're talking about with this idea of salvation? And so, in the spirit of no rhetorical questions, what is it that we talk about when we say salvation? When you hear the word salvation, what other words come to mind? How do we define salvation? What does that word mean to us? What other words would we use to relate to that? Saved. Is that what you said too, Susan? Yeah, saved. Yeah, Melody. Forgiveness. Restoration. Reconciliation. You're doing great. I'm not waiting for the right answer. These are all right answers, but I do want to give plenty of space for any thoughts. And like I said before, I get a whole week to think about what answers I'm going to say. So even if you need more time after worship to keep thinking, that's obviously okay. But yeah, we think with salvation, I think about life a lot too, right? We talked a lot about eternal life this year and talked about eternal life not just being life that is eternally long, but also life that is eternally deep, right? Life that is eternally wide, life that is eternally rich and experienced in God. And I think it's important in part because if salvation is just about living forever, right? Like some kind of fantasy story where people never die, that's all well and good, but then we miss some of these other words, right? Because just living forever doesn't necessarily have anything to do with peace or reconciliation or restoration or forgiveness, right? And so salvation is about more than just life that is eternally long. Salvation is about having life that is eternal and that is eternally deep and eternally wide. And I think about, I'm sure I've used the image before of the scuba diver, right, who scoops down and gets a pearl out of the mud. And that scuba diver, she's not just going to then put that muddy pearl in a display case, right? She's not going to do that. She's going to wash it first. She's going to restore it to its full beauty, how it's intended to be before putting it in a display case. And so I think it's important to remember that salvation has these sort of aspects to it as well, right? It's not that God is just scooping down and picking us up still covered in mud and stress and brokenness and sin and all the stuff, right, that weighs us down, and just taking us still covered in mud and putting us in some beautiful heaven display case. That wouldn't be a very full, deep, eternal life if I still have all of that gunk in me and on me, that stuff we talked about last week, the stresses and whatever it is that makes our chests tight. Instead, God restores us. God forgives us. God brings fullness to us and makes us how we were supposed to be. God brings healing to our lives. And this restoration, this redemption, this washing is certainly tied to forgiveness, as Melody said, right? It's one of the reasons why we circle around the font every morning, right? We start by remembering that we are washed clean in these waters, and we have time of repentance and words of forgiveness to start us off. But even forgiveness isn't the whole thing. My theology professor used to share an example of, say it's like a guy got shot. And so he goes to the doctor and says, "Doctor, help me, I've been shot." And the doctor looks him over and he says, "It's okay, I forgive you." Okay, thanks, but could you heal me, maybe? I'm dying here. Forgiveness is great, and it's an important part of that redeeming process, and yet we also need to be healed. We need to be washed clean. We're dying here. The stuff that is weighing us down, the brokenness in our lives, the things that disrupt our relationship with one another and with our creation and with God, these things are killing us, and they're killing our neighbor, and they're killing our world. And we need to be healed. We need to be rescued. We need to be restored and redeemed. And so salvation is all of these things. Yes, life that is eternally long, but also life that is eternally deep and eternally experienced in our eternal God, who brings healing and wholeness and forgiveness and all these things. And the good news that we see in Isaiah today is that this salvation, this peace and joy and forgiveness and healing, all of these things, this is not just for you, and it's not just for me, and it's not even just for all of us here in this church, and all the fine folks in that church over there, and all the fine folks in that church over there. And it's not just even for all of humanity. We see that God's salvation is intended for all of creation. The wilderness and the dry land shall be glad. The desert shall rejoice and blossom. The water shall break forth in the wilderness, the streams in the desert. The burning sand shall become a pool, and the thirsty ground springs of water. The grass shall become reeds and rushes. The deserts will experience salvation. The mountains will experience salvation. The rivers will experience salvation. The wolf and the lamb will experience salvation. The lion and the cattle and the kid and the snake. The salvation is for everything. It's not just for the nations, and it's not just for us and our relationships, but it's a cosmic salvation that encompasses humanity, but also encompasses our world. and our creation, and our creatures, and plants, and everything. And the other good news is that this salvation isn't just a thing that we're looking forward to happening someday in the future. Because we've been talking about this in Advent too, right? That we're in now, this kind of now but not yet time, right? Where we remember Jesus has come. Jesus was born, Jesus lived, and through his life and death and resurrection, salvation has come. That's what our gospel points to. The blind are already seeing, the lame are already leaping for joy. The salvation is at hand, and yet we look around the world and it doesn't look like this Isaiah vision, right? There's still a lot of places where this vision is not our reality. And so we find ourselves in this in-between of now. God's salvation exists and is at hand, it is experienced, and yet it is not yet fully realized. God's dream for the world is not fully come. And so in this Advent season especially, we stand in this now but not yet time and wrestle with how is it that we experience salvation and yet look forward to that day when nation will not lift up sword against nation, where lion and calf will be together, where the desert will blossom. And we've been spending a lot of time, I think, thinking about this side, the not yet stuff, and dreaming about that day and envisioning what that day will look like and exploring how it is that we can orient ourselves towards that day. But I think it's also important to remember that there is the now too, right? That Christ has already come at Christmas. Salvation is already at hand in our lives. I think about there is a vacant lot on Groomtown and Wayne, just down the street. I don't know how many of you drive in that way, but if you do, you drive by it, right? It's across from the food line next to the Shell station, right? It's just this empty, ugly, vacant lot that is like part gravel and part mud and part puddles, and it just sits there and is ugly and useless and whatever until this time of year, right? Because who knows what it is right now? It's a Christmas tree farm full of beauty, of trees that are intended to bring this Christmas joy into our lives, to prepare our homes for Christ. It's full of lights and music and people gathering to experience these things. The burning sand has become a pool. The thirsty ground is springing for water. And it's just a simple little whatever kind of example, and yet it's not insignificant. Salvation has come to that corner lot for however long it is until the trees are gone and it goes back to being a lot. And yet, in this moment, in a real way, it has been restored. And God's beauty shines through it, is experienced in it. And so our real question today, the one that you might have to think about for a while, or maybe you have some instant answers that we can share together, but the real question is, where do we experience God's salvation now in our lives? You think about your life, your week, your day, your whole life, whatever it is you want to focus on. Where have you ever felt this sort of salvation moment? Even if it's just like a glimpse, right? Like a farm that's only there for a month and then it's gone. Or maybe a moment where you experience and feel this overwhelming joy, this disconcerting peace, this sort of abundant life, an eternal moment. Do you know what I'm talking about? Where have we experienced this sensation, even for a second? Because we say that salvation exists, and it's here, and it's with us, and you're not yet experiencing it in the all-the-time, overpowering way that God intends. But I believe that salvation is at hand, and we're feeling it in moments. So, is anyone brave and can share any kind of moment, anything? I'd love to give you an example, Betty, because I've had all week to think about this question. So I think about, Christmas Eve worship for me is a time where the whole room is filled with people. It's filled with light and joy and singing, and we do that every single week, and yet, for some reason, on Christmas Eve, it's just a little different, right? It's dark. This room is so beautiful when it's dark. And for me, I spend most of the service like this, with my back to everybody, but there's a moment, I've been here, this will be my third Christmas, and both the last 2 years, there's a moment where I walk up behind the altar and turn around, and it's a salvation moment, right? I can barely choke out the words I'm supposed to be saying, because for some reason, in some way that I can't put to words, which is maybe what makes asking this question hard. For some reason, there is an overpowering sense of God's self in the room. Ron? The birth of a child. Yeah. Thank you. Baptism. Yeah. Baptism of our own baptism, baptism of any child. Sorry, someone over here?
In nature.
In nature.
Out in hike, quiet.
Yeah. And there are times where you just feel it. Right? Yeah.
Watching and hearing Landry be such a total part of this community.
Yeah, watching our babies do wonderful things as a part of our community. A wedding, yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah.
I would have to say anytime a young person, whether it be a teenager or a small child, walks up to any adult and I hear them say something that makes you feel like you said something that resonated with them and they don't feel alone anymore.
Yeah. When our youth approach and talk to adults and are heard and understood and valued. Yeah, drop it.
I sometimes feel it when I come home from Christmas Eve service. The world seems to be peaceful.
Yeah. Driving home from Christmas Eve worship with the world at peace. Yeah. Yeah, Melody. Yeah. Yeah, the wonder in children's eyes during Christmas celebrations. I think about another example. The last time I served in our food pantry, served is held loosely. I go and hang out with people and talk and stuff while others serve. But the last time I went was a week or two ago, and there I think were about 10 people from our Father there volunteering and working, right? Those who've done that, I don't know if you felt that thing, right? But there's some reason why 10 people are showing up on a week to do this thing, and for me, I think there's a glimpse of salvation in it, and in the places in our world where there are burning sands being turned to refreshing pools, and to participate in that and in some way catch a glimpse of this salvation that we're talking about. The drive-thru nativity? The drive-thru nativity, especially the kids with the camel. Yeah. I don't know who all shared this. Last year when we were gearing up for the drive-thru, I talked to a lot of people with a secret agenda of y'all, this is a lot of work. Is it really worth it? Should we rethink if this is really worth it? Because it is a lot of work, right? And then we got to the night, and it was the best night of the whole year. I was like, we could never get rid of this. This is the best thing ever. Because it is, in so many ways, in the invitation of people we don't know coming, and having cookies and snacks in our space, and the delight in kids getting to pet a camel, which everyone has wanted to do their whole lives, right? And all of these things, there's this presence of salvation in a now sort of way. Betty, did you have something? Renew, is that what you said? Yeah, renewal, right? A sense of renewal, of rebirth even, right? Of being made fresh, being made whole, being restored and redeemed and healed and cleansed. And so there's a lot of reasons that these things are worth naming. I thank you so much for sharing so many things, because I could not have put together this list by myself, right? This is why we're doing what we're doing. But I think that one reason to name these things is simply to recognize them, right? That these things are happening in our lives. We're experiencing moments of salvation. And in naming them, we notice them, right? How often do they go by and we don't even realize it? But if we can call attention to these moments and name them for what they are, as moments of the crocuses blossoming in the midst of deserts, what power that gives to our lives, and how that shapes our moments, and how it leads us from one salvation moment to the next. And the other reason I think it's helpful is in this leading sense, right? Again, it's this Isaiah highway. A highway shall be there, shall be called the Holy Way. I believe these moments are like signposts for us, right? As we identify what is this holy way. If our goal is to experience life that is eternal, life that is eternally deep and rich and wide and whole, then noting where these places are happening, it's not random, right? It's not that we're just walking down the street and God's like, maybe I'll throw a moment there. There are things that bring this about. It's an experience of God's self. And so we have ways of immersing ourselves in these moments, of letting them be signposts of the way that we might walk on this highway together, even as we wait for this not yet. We wait for Christmas that comes in 10 days, as the kids said, but also comes who knows when, right? This great day when the vision will be fulfilled. Even as we wait, we can walk on this highway and experience salvation now and share it with one another and invite others on this journey together to walk this way of light and love and salvation, even as we wait for that great day when all the vision shall be fulfilled. Come, Lord Jesus.